My husband, M38, is trying to convince me, F28, to have his ex-wife be the primary caretaker for our daughter instead of utilizing daycare when we return to work. Our daughter will be 3 months old when my maternity leave ends, and the plan has always been for her to go to daycare. We have read reviews and interviewed the director at the daycare, and up until about a month before our daughter was born, he seemed satisfied with this arrangement. Around the 7-month mark of my pregnancy, my husband got the idea that we should ask his ex-wife to watch our daughter instead of utilizing daycare. We have a very positive co-parenting relationship with her and have never had so much as an argument. We all work together to do what's best for their son, M8. While we have a great co-parenting relationship, I'd like to maintain the current boundaries we have in place. To me, having to drop our daughter off every day and pick her up before and after work has potential to blur lines and create an arrangement I'm simply not comfortable with. While I understand this would likely save us money and give him peace of mind with personally knowing who will be watching our daughter, I don't think it is something I will ever be entirely okay with. He insists I need to put my ego aside and take emotions out of my decision-making to choose what's best for our daughter. This arrangement would also require him to alter his work schedule significantly and require either one of us to take off work when she or their son is ill, not to mention we would have to plan summer vacations around her schedule as well. Maybe I am more comfortable with the idea of daycare since I was in 1 until roughly 5th grade and still maintain contact with the teachers I had while there. I just want to maintain boundaries. So am I the asshole for not wanting my husband's ex-wife to watch our daughter full-time when we return to work? Edit. She would be paid, just not as much as the daycare. Relevant comments. OP on how she helped takes care of her stepson when on his father's custody time. OP. What I do to take care of him is limited to maintain appropriate boundaries. For example, bath time is only done with his dad, and in the entirety of our relationship, I've only watched him independently for longer than 30 minutes once. Not to mention he is 8 years old. So he knows who his mother is and can understand the role of a step-parent to a certain extent. I'm not afraid to say I don't want to increase the time we are spending with his ex. I don't know a lot of people that are looking to be in constant communication with their spouse's ex, though. She hasn't agreed to watching our daughter. The idea of it was mentioned to her by my husband a while ago when he brought up the price of daycare with her one day. Apparently, she said I'd do it for half that, and he seems to have taken that comment and ran with it. I had asked him not to discuss it with her further because I don't want to pursue that option. Since then, he has continued to push me to reconsider. OP on how her husband's ex can be at home during the weeks and what the ex would get out of babysitting for OOP and her husband. OP. She works Friday/Saturday nights. This works well for her, and she is able to avoid childcare this way. I have a career and job that I love and want to return to after maternity leave. Daycare was always the plan even prior to me getting pregnant. Well, until now. She would be paid, just not as much as a daycare. I'm sure she could use the extra money and her schedule allows for it, since she only works Friday/Sat nights. My husband currently works 4 days a week and could change the day he takes off to Fridays instead of Mondays to allow this arrangement to work. She is in a long-term relationship and seems happy, so to me it seems unlikely that there is anything suspicious going on between her and my husband. It's not even that I don't trust his ex to watch her occasionally, but more as like an occasional babysitter. I am just uncomfortable with the idea of her being a primary caregiver for our daughter. I have argued that we would be at the will of her schedule and the potential for last-minute cancellation could be problematic. He countered with, well, I have plenty of sick/vacation time, so it's not a big deal. OP on her husband's custody of his son, and if he is a very involved father. OP, custody is 50-50. He is a very involved father. We attend every soccer practice/game. Sundays regularly involve special outings, and helping with homework/extra practice for the areas his son struggles with have never been an issue. Commenter. Honestly, you're not wrong for wanting to keep things simple and stick to the daycare plan. Boundaries are important, especially in blended families. Update 1. I am pleasantly surprised with the update I came to give today. After showing my husband the post I made here on Reddit, he seemed genuinely surprised with the overwhelming number of people that were siding with me on this. After reading through comments, we had a very cordial conversation about why he feels his ex would be a better option than daycare. He went on to explain that he was often watched by his father's ex growing up and that he felt it created a village for him to rely on as a kid. With his ex watching our daughter, he feels we would eliminate risks associated with daycare, and this would allow our daughter to have the undivided attention of one individual. Thanks to this post, he was much more willing to hear me out and ultimately left the decision up to me, but still made his opinion on daycare very clear. After our argument the other night, I gave in to a certain extent and told him to reach out to his ex to see if this is something she would even want to do. While she wasn't opposed to it, she wasn't necessarily jumping at the opportunity either. She seemed indifferent and more like the money would be beneficial, but wasn't going to be offended if we chose daycare at the end of the day. I have stood my ground throughout this and made it clear I'd like to maintain our current co-parenting dynamic and avoid putting ourselves in a position where we could jeopardize the relationship. We still don't agree on the matter, but he has accepted my choice and validated my feelings. All in all, a great outcome. Thanks for all the input, guys. Relevant comments. Commenter. Wait, so he was making all these plans in his head and became vitriolic about it without even having a conversation with his ex about whether she'd be willing to babysit? Dude puts his wants and feelings before both of you frequently, doesn't he? He sounds extremely selfish. OP. He had a brief discussion with her months ago when discussing the cost of childcare where she responded with, "Hell, I'd do it for half that." He took it literally, while to me it seemed more of just a light-hearted remark. I had asked him not to discuss it with her further because I was opposed to the. Evidently she was serious. Update 2. Well, folks, I thought things were settled after my last update, but oh boy, was I wrong. So, we've been living in a temporary truce for a few weeks. My husband seemed to accept my decision about daycare, and I've been prepping myself mentally for the end of maternity leave. Things were calm, maybe too calm, but then the bomb dropped. One afternoon, I came home from running errands, and my husband was in the middle of a conversation with his ex-wife. In our living room, apparently, she'd swung by to discuss other options since she was thinking it over again. Mind you, I had no idea this was happening. No heads up, nothing. So, I'm standing there, watching my husband and his ex discussing our daughter like it's a casual business deal, and I just about exploded. Turns out, my husband had continued texting his ex about the babysitting idea. Behind my back, I confronted him right there, and he had the nerve to say, "I didn't think you'd mind if we just talked about it." "Oh, you didn't think I'd mind?" My jaw dropped. I reminded him that the decision had been made, and by we, I meant me. But no, he had to throw in, "I just want to keep all options open." Here's where things get weird. His ex-wife starts defending him. She says, "I totally understand where you're coming from, but I also see his point." She then proceeds to give me this lecture about how blended families work best when there's flexibility and open communication. Like I'm the one creating the problem. At this point, I'm ready to scream, but I keep my cool barely. I tell her, as politely as humanly possible, this is not about flexibility. This is about boundaries. We've got a good co-parenting dynamic, and I don't want to mess with that by turning you into our nanny. But then wait for it, she drops the bombshell. Actually, she says, I might be pregnant. Yep, pregnant. And she thought this would somehow help her case. I blinked. My brain short-circuited for a second. All I could think was, is she seriously trying to convince us to let her watch our newborn while she might be dealing with a newborn of her own in a few months? My husband, the eternal optimist, immediately shifted gears, asking her how she felt and if she needed anything, while I just stood there, floored. I managed to ask, "So, are you still offering to babysit our daughter, or is that off the table now?" She gave me this super chill smile and said, "Oh, I'd still do it. It could work out great. The kids could grow up together." Excuse me, what? It was like everyone in the room had lost their minds except for me. I had to walk out before I said something I'd regret. My husband followed me and tried to convince me that this was all just a big misunderstanding. He swore he didn't know about the pregnancy either and apologized for not being upfront about continuing the conversation with her. He even suggested that with 2 kids around, it might actually make her an even better choice because she'd be in baby mode. I stared at him like he had grown 2 heads. Long story short, the ex-wife left after what felt like an eternity, and now I'm stuck wondering how on earth this spiraled so far out of control. The whole situation feels surreal. My husband and I aren't exactly fighting, but there's definitely a crack forming here. He's been weirdly quiet since then, like he's processing the whole thing too, or just biding his time until he can bring it up again. Update 3. Alright, buckle up because things have officially gone off the rails. I thought the last update was wild, but I had no idea what was coming. It all started the day after the whole ex-wife is maybe pregnant, but still wants to watch our kid bombshell. My husband and I had this tense, silent morning routine. He was acting like he didn't know what to say, and I was still in disbelief that we were even entertaining this nonsense. Then I get a call from daycare. The daycare we'd already signed up for. They tell me there's an issue with the paperwork and that they need me to confirm our daughter's enrollment ASAP or we'd lose her spot. So, naturally, I think, no big deal, I'll handle it. But when I go to grab the paperwork from our home office, it's gone. I ask my husband if he's seen it, and he suddenly gets all fidgety and says, "Oh, yeah, I was looking it over last night and must have misplaced it. I'll find it later." Misplaced it? Are you kidding me? This is daycare, not some casual form that can wait until later. I press him, but he brushes me off and tells me he'll take care of it. Cue the paranoia. I know my husband has been weirdly fixated on the ex-wife as babysitter idea, and now I'm wondering if this misplacement was on purpose. My gut was telling me something was off, so while he was at work, I decided to call the daycare again, just to double-check everything. And that's when I find out that my husband had already called them to cancel our daughter's spot. I swear, I thought I was going to pass out from rage. He had gone behind my back again, canceled daycare, and didn't even bother to mention it. When he came home that night, I was waiting. Let's just say there was no cordial conversation this time. I laid into him. I lost it. I asked him if he had lost his mind. Canceling our daughter's spot in daycare without talking to me first? What kind of partnership is that? And of course, he starts with the same tired argument dash. I think it's better for our daughter to be with someone we know. You're not thinking clearly about this. You're letting your emotions get in the way. Letting my emotions get in the way? At this point, I'm not even sure what emotions I'm supposed to be feeling because all of this seems insane. His ex-wife could be pregnant. He's canceling daycare behind my back, and he's still acting like I'm the one who's overreacting. Then, just as I'm about to walk out of the room to cool off, he drops another bomb. He's already offered his ex-wife the job. Apparently, they had another chat again, behind my back, and she officially agreed to babysit. He tells me that she's going to need the extra money now that she's expecting and that we're doing her a favor. Oh, and did I mention he's already adjusted his work schedule to accommodate this whole ridiculous plan? Because of course he has. I'm standing there, staring at this man who is supposed to be my partner, trying to figure out how we got here. He's made all these decisions that directly affect our daughter, our family, without consulting me. And for what? To save a little money and avoid daycare? I told him flat out, this isn't happening. We are not having your ex-wife be our daughter's primary caregiver. I don't care what arrangements you've made. I will find another daycare, and we are sticking with the plan. And then, for the first time in this entire saga, he snaps back at me. You need to let go of your jealousy and stop trying to control everything. This isn't just your decision. She's my daughter too. It hit me like a truck. All this time, I've been trying to stay calm, rational, even compromising only for him to turn around and accuse me of being jealous? Jealous of his ex-wife? I couldn't believe it. The conversation ended there. I didn't know what else to say. He stormed out of the house, and I spent the night alone, wondering if I'm the crazy one in all of this. Am I being unreasonable? Should I just give in and let her watch our daughter? But no, deep down I know that this isn't about jealousy. It's about boundaries, trust, and respect, all of which have been shattered at this point. The worst part? The next morning, my husband didn't come home. I got a text from him saying he was staying with a friend to cool off, and that we'll talk when he's ready. I don't even know where we stand right now. Everything feels like it's falling apart, and I'm sitting here with a 3-month-old baby, wondering how the hell this became my life. Update 4. Alright, you guys, I wasn't planning on updating this soon, but things have taken a turn I definitely didn't see coming. Strap in because this is about to get even messier. So, after my husband's dramatic walkout, I spent the next day bouncing between anger, confusion, and, honestly, exhaustion. I've got a newborn to take care of, and here I am, dealing with this soap opera-level drama. I didn't hear from him for almost 48 hours, aside from a couple of vague texts saying he needed space. I wasn't about to chase him down, so I focused on our daughter and started looking for backup daycare options since, my husband had canceled our original one. Then, the plot thickened. I got a call from his ex-wife. I wasn't sure if I should even pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. She sounded weirdly upbeat, like she had some kind of news. And oh boy, did she ever. She's not pregnant. Apparently, she took multiple tests after our awkward living room discussion and confirmed that it was a false alarm. She called to let me know because, in her words, I thought it might change your perspective on me watching your daughter. What? I wasn't about to engage in that conversation, so I just politely thanked her for the update and hung up. But it didn't sit right with me. Something felt off. Why was she so eager to keep this arrangement going, even though she's not pregnant now? And why hadn't my husband told me any of this? That's when I decided to take a step I should have taken a long time ago. I called up a mutual friend, someone who knows both my husband and his ex from way back. Someone I trusted to give me the unvarnished truth. And what she told me, it blew everything wide open. Turns out, this babysitting arrangement had been in the works long before my husband ever mentioned it to me. He and his ex had been casually discussing the idea for months, long before I was even pregnant. It had started as a hypothetical, what if kind of thing, but apparently, he'd been warming her up to the idea well before I ever got wind of it. He'd been laying the groundwork, just in case. But here's where it gets really messy. My friend told me that this isn't the first time my husband has gone behind my back with his ex. Apparently, there have been multiple instances over the years where they've made co-parenting decisions regarding their son without consulting me, and it always seemed like my husband was more focused on keeping things smooth between him and his ex than maintaining boundaries with me. I felt sick. Like, physically sick. How could I have been so blind to this? All those little chats they've had over the years, the casual text messages that seemed innocuous at the time now. I'm questioning everything. Has this been going on all along? Is there some sort of unspoken agreement between them that I'm not privy to? It's like my whole marriage suddenly feels like a lie. I had trusted him to respect our relationship, to maintain boundaries, and to always keep me in the loop when it came to decisions that affect our family. And now, I'm realizing that he's been prioritizing her comfort and needs over mine, and I didn't even see it coming. So, when my husband finally showed up at home 2 days later, I was ready. We sat down to talk, and I laid everything out. I told him I knew about the conversations with his ex from before I was even pregnant. I told him how disrespected I felt, how blindsided, how he had completely shattered my trust by making decisions behind my back. And you know what he did? He apologized, but not in the way I wanted or needed. It was one of those half-hearted apologies, the kind where he says, "I'm sorry you feel that way," rather than taking real accountability. He kept saying he didn't think it was that big of a deal, that he was just trying to keep the peace and do what's best for everyone involved. Everyone involved? Huh? Funny how I seem to be the only one left out of that equation. He tried to reassure me, saying that now that the pregnancy scare is over, we can go back to normal and stick with daycare if that's what I really want. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a hollow promise to smooth things over without addressing the real issue. The real issue? I don't trust him anymore. And here's where things get even weirder. That same night, as we were talking, he got a text from wait for it his ex-wife. He glanced at his phone and went pale. I asked him who it was, and at first, he hesitated. But then he showed me the text. It said, "Are you sure this is what you want? We need to talk. I don't know what's going on between them anymore, but it's clear this babysitting arrangement was just the tip of the iceberg. There's something deeper happening here, something that goes beyond co-parenting, and I don't know what to do with that information." Update 5. After that last bombshell, the cryptic text from his ex, I knew I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty. The air in our house had become suffocating. Every conversation felt like a minefield, and I was exhausted. I needed clarity, closure, or some kind of truth, whatever it was. And I needed it now. So, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called his ex-wife. Yeah, I know. It was risky, and part of me felt like I was crossing a line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than what I was being told. I needed to hear it from her. I kept it short and direct. "I saw your text to him. What do you mean by, are you sure this is what you want?" There was silence on the other end of the line, and then she sighed a deep, loaded sigh, the kind that told me this conversation wasn't going to be pretty. Her voice was calm but heavy, like she had been preparing for this moment. She told me that over the last year, my husband had been increasingly confiding in her not just about their son, but about our marriage. He had apparently been opening up to her about how difficult things had been between us, about how he felt misunderstood, and how he missed the simplicity of their old dynamic. In short, my husband had been emotionally leaning on his ex. A lot. She claimed there was nothing romantic going on, that they weren't crossing any boundaries in that way, but the damage was done. He had created an emotional dependency with her. And the worst part? She wasn't the one to initiate it, he was. All those chats and casual conversations I had brushed off over the years, they weren't just innocent co-parenting discussions. They were a lifeline for him. And she admitted that, in a way, she had let it happen because it was easier for her, too. Having him lean on her made her feel validated, like she still had a hold on him. I hung up the phone and just sat there, numb. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream, couldn't even feel angry in that moment. I felt betrayed, yes, but more than anything, I felt tired. I confronted him that night. There was no rage left in me, just a quiet need for honesty. I laid it all out, what she had told me, what I knew, and how deeply he had hurt me by going to her instead of working through things with me. I asked him the million-dollar question. Are you in love with her? And here's the kicker, he didn't answer right away. He didn't deny it. He didn't rush to say no. He just sat there, staring at his hands, and that silence? It said everything I needed to know. Finally, he looked at me, tears in his eyes, and said, "I don't know. I don't know." That was his answer. Not a no, not an apology, just uncertainty. And that's when I realized it was over. This wasn't just about daycare or babysitting arrangements. This was about trust that had been eroding long before I even got pregnant. I had been fighting to keep boundaries, to keep us strong, while he had been slowly inching back toward his ex, emotionally tethered to a past that I could never compete with. So, I made the hardest decision of my life. I told him I was done. I wasn't going to fight for a man who couldn't even be sure if he loved me or his ex-wife. I wasn't going to raise our daughter in an environment where I constantly felt like the third wheel in my own marriage. I wasn't going to stick around waiting for him to decide where his heart really was. I deserved better, and so did our daughter. I packed up a few things and left that night, taking our daughter with me. I went to stay with my sister, who welcomed us with open arms, and, honestly, I've never felt more relieved. The weight of trying to hold that marriage together had been suffocating me, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. As for him, we haven't spoken much since. I told him he could see our daughter, and we'd work out a formal custody arrangement when I was ready, but right now, I needed space, both physically and emotionally. He's staying at a friend's place, probably trying to figure out his own mess of feelings. I won't sugarcoat it. It's been hard. Walking away from someone you thought you'd spend your life with is brutal. But as the days go by, I feel stronger. I look at my daughter, and I know I made the right choice. She deserves a mother who's confident, clear-headed, and not tangled up in a web of lies and half-truths.